Good evening. It is Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. You are listening to the West Africa Intelligence Update. I am your host, and tonight we turn our eyes to a region that has, for the past fortnight, become the crucible of a global power struggle. We are witnessing a fundamental fracturing of the post-colonial order in the Sahel and a perilous shakeup in Nigeria. From the smoking tarmac of Niamey to the quiet, strategic corridors of Washington, the map is being redrawn.
It is a map defined by volatility. We are not merely reporting on isolated skirmishes or diplomatic spats. We are observing a seismic shift, a violent realignment of the security architecture that has held West Africa together for decades. Old alliances are dissolving, and in that vacuum, new, harder-edged realities are taking hold.
Before we step into the details of this theater, we must acknowledge the engine behind this intelligence. This broadcast is sponsored by ProWave AI Powering Intelligence. The deep dive we are conducting tonight is generated by Stylo News, an AI-powered news application.
And it is worth pausing to explain exactly what that means for you, the listener. Stylo News is the consumer-facing version of the Stylo Intel Ops software. This is the same algorithmic engine used by government agencies, military command centers, and enterprise operations to track global threats.
Essentially, we are looking at the world through the same lens as the decision-makers in the Situation Room. We're utilizing a system that scans over 250 sources across 20 languages, employing vector search and what's called pattern-of-life analysis to distill signal from noise. Tonight, we grant you access to that professional-grade clear sight.
Let us begin where the noise was loudest. On the night of January 29, the capital of Niger, Niamey. It ceased to be a diplomatic hub and became, for a time, a battlefield.
The reports crossing the wire described a chaotic scene. We're talking about the Diori Hamani International Airport and the adjacent Airbase 101. This is not some hit and run by bandits on a rural outpost. This was a sustained, coordinated assault on the country's primary lifeline to the outside world.
The specifics of the engagement are telling. The firefight lasted for a full hour. We're talking about sustained heavy gunfire and multiple explosions rocking the capital. But what truly signals the sophistication of this attack was the response. Anti-aircraft defenses were active.
Active? Why is that so significant?
Well, intelligence suggests the attackers, approximately 40 militants affiliated with the Islamic State, may have utilized drone technology or even attempted to seize air assets.
And the defense of that airfield involved a controversial new partner in the region.
Indeed. The attack was eventually repelled, but not solely by the Nigerian armed forces. They were heavily supported by the Russian Africa Corps. This is the new reality on the ground, Russian boots and Russian barrels defending the junta's critical infrastructure.
And the casualties.
The count stands at 4 Nigerian soldiers injured, while 20 militants were neutralized and another 11 captured.
So the kinetic battle ended by sunrise. But the diplomatic war was only just beginning. In the aftermath, General Abdurrahman Tiani, the leader of the Nigerian junta, did not mince words. He pointed a finger directly at his neighbors.
It was an accusation that sent shockwaves through the chancelleries of West Africa. General Tiani publicly accused President Emmanuel Macron of France, along with President Patrice Talon of Benin and President Alassane Ouattara of the Ivory Coast, accused them of actively sponsoring this attack.
That is a grave charge. To accuse a neighboring head of state of sponsoring terrorism against your capital. That is effectively a declaration that diplomatic relations have collapsed entirely.
Precisely. The junta is framing this not as a terrorist insurgency, but as a war of independence against colonial proxies. They argue that France is using Benin and the Ivory Coast as staging grounds to destabilize these Sahelian regimes.
Of course, Paris, Cotonou, and Abidjan have issued categorical denials.
They have. They dismissed the claims as propaganda, something designed to shore up domestic support for the junta. However, the waters are muddied by the intervention of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR. Moscow has publicly corroborated the junta's claims, explicitly accusing France of destabilization efforts.
We have a terror attack that has been instantly weaponized into a great power narrative. The Russians say it's the French say it's terrorists, and the junta is caught in a struggle for survival.
And amidst this rhetoric, the United States made a quiet but significant move. The State Department ordered non-emergency staff to leave the embassy in Niamey. It is a prudent measure, but it also signals a lack of confidence in the immediate stability of the capital.
This brings us to the broader reaction from Washington. While the embassy staff departs, the policymakers back in D.C. are executing a maneuver that can only be described as a complete reversal of doctrine.
This is the geopolitical pivot we alluded to at the top of the hour. For years, U.S. strategy in Africa has been predicated on democracy first, the idea that aid and security cooperation are contingent on democratic norms. Over the last week, that policy has, well, effectively been scrapped.
We have heard reports from the State Department, specifically from an official named Nick Checker, signaling a new course.
That new course is transactional diplomacy. The United States has decided to engage directly with the military juntas of the Alliance of Sahelian States, that's Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, regardless of their democratic status. These regimes have rejected ECOWAS timelines for elections, they have jailed dissidents, and yet Washington is coming to the table.
One has to ask the hard question then, why? Why abandon the moral high ground now?
The answer lies in the periodic table: uranium and lithium. These are the critical minerals of the 21st century economy and defense industry, and the Sahel is rich in them. Washington has done the cold calculus. They've realized that if they vacate the region because of moral objections, they are simply ceding the ground and the resources to Russia and China.
It's a return to realpolitik in its purest form.
It is. The logic is that sanctions and isolation failed. They didn't force a return to democracy. They only pushed these nations into the waiting arms of Vladimir Putin. By pivoting to transactionalism, the U.S. hopes to claw back some influence. But it comes at a cost.
The cost being the credibility of institutions like ECOWAS.
Exactly. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, has been trying to enforce democratic norms through sanctions and diplomatic pressure. By bypassing ECOWAS and cutting deals directly with the juntas, the U.S. is effectively undermining the regional bloc. It is a severe blow to the concept of collective regional security.
And it certainly leaves the local champions of democracy in the cold. We have reports of continued repression. Just look at the arrest of the Malian journalist Youssouf Sissoko.
Arrested merely for criticizing the Nigerian junta. Under the old policy, the U.S. might have made his release a condition of talks. Under this new transactional diplomacy, human rights concerns are likely to be relegated to the bottom of the agenda. The priority is containment of Russia, not the protection of the press.
Now, while the Sahel burns and Washington pivots, we must look south to the giant of the region. Nigeria is facing a crisis that threatens to eclipse even the instability in Niger.
Nigeria is the demographic and economic anchor of West Africa. If Nigeria destabilizes, the entire region capsizes. And the intelligence from the last 2 weeks is deeply alarming. We're seeing a multi-front crisis that is rotting the security apparatus from the inside out.
Let's start with that internal rot. On January 27, a trial began that should have every observer on edge.
The court-martial of 16 Nigerian military officers. These men were arrested back in October 2025, accused of plotting a coup against President Bola Tinubu. The fact that this has gone to trial is a public admission that the contagion of military takeovers, which has already claimed Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, has infected the Nigerian officer corps.
That is the nightmare scenario, the breakdown of civilian supremacy in the region's largest democracy. But President Tinubu isn't just watching his back, he's facing a new hybrid enemy on the ground.
We need to talk about Lakurawa. This is a group emerging in northwest Nigeria, particularly in Sokoto and Kebbi states. They are not your standard Boko Haram splinter cell. They represent a hybrid threat, part religious extremism, part organized crime syndicate.
How do they operate?
They are insidious. They move into communities in the tri-border area where policing is non-existent and offer themselves as protectors. They fight off the common bandits and cattle rustlers that have plagued these villages for years. Once they have gained the community's trust, the trap snaps shut. They impose harsh religious laws, levy heavy taxes, and effectively replace the state.
It's a protection racket disguised as a caliphate.
Precisely. And they are growing strong enough to draw international fire. We can confirm that the United States conducted airstrikes against Lakurawa positions in December 2025. Furthermore, as of February 4, a small U.S. military team has been deployed to Nigeria specifically to advise on countering this group.
But despite this assistance, the violence is not contained. In fact, between February 4th and 8th, we saw a horrific escalation.
Escalation is a polite word for what occurred. In Kwara State and Katsina, we witnessed massacres. Insurgents operating out of the Kinji National Park launched attacks that left nearly 200 people dead. The reports are gruesome, civilians bound and executed. This wasn't combat, it was slaughter.
And the geography here is critical.
Yeah.
Kwara State is not in the remote northeast.
No, it is not. Kwara is the gateway to the south. It buffers the southwest region, the Yoruba heartland, from the instability of the north. The fact that insurgents are operating with impunity in Kwara means the violence is moving toward Lagos.
Lagos, the economic engine, the megacity. If the insurgency reaches the Lagos-Ibadan corridor,
Then the Nigerian economy grinds to a halt. This has prompted the military to launch Operation Savannah Shield, a desperate attempt to plug the gap. But with the military distracted by internal coup trials, one has to question their capacity to hold the line.
let us use the tools at our disposal to understand the men behind these moves. Using Stylo's pattern of life analysis, what does the data tell us about the mindset of the key players?
The profile of General Tiani in Niger is one of a man backed into a corner. His primary directive is regime survival. He is pivoting to Russia for muscle, that is, physical protection against counter-coups, but he remains open to U.S. deals because he knows Russia cannot provide the financial aid he needs. He's playing both sides to keep his head above water.
And President Tinubu in Nigeria.
A man under siege. The analysis shows a leader balancing on a knife's edge. He has to purge the military of coup plotters without triggering the very mutiny he fears. Simultaneously, he has to project strength against these insurgents. His reliance on U.S. intelligence is becoming absolute because he cannot fully trust his own security apparatus.
And from the perspective of the U.S. administration.
Pragmatism bordering on cynicism. The sentiment analysis of State Department communications suggests a complete shift to realpolitik. The containment of Russian influence is now the only metric that seems to matter. If that means shaking hands with dictators, so be it.
We should also touch on the sentiment of the people, the millions living through this.
In the Sahel, the anti-French sentiment is calcified. It is the dominant political force. There is a cautious, almost desperate optimism regarding Russian assistance. This is largely because the Western interventions of the last decade are viewed as, well, abject failures. Conversely, in Nigeria, the sentiment is fear. The public watches the violence creep south, and there is a growing anger at the government's inability to secure the nation.
And beneath that fear, there is hunger.
Yes, food prices in Niger are up 21%. We are seeing the convergence of conflict and climate change, creating a resource scarcity that drives recruitment for these groups. Hungry men are easy to radicalize.
So as we look to the horizon, what are the indicators we should be watching in the coming weeks?
There are three primary vectors. First, watch the operations of the AES, the Alliance of Sahelian States. They're launching joint military operations without Western air support. If they fail or suffer a major defeat, the Russian Africa Corps will demand a deeper, perhaps permanent, command role.
Second,
The U.S. diplomatic tour. We need to see the fine print of these transactional deals. What exactly is the U.S. offering? Is it weapons? Is it sanctions relief? The specifics will tell us just how far Washington is willing to go to displace Russia.
and finally, the fate of the Nigerian South.
Operation Savannah Shield. If the Nigerian military cannot clear Kainji National Park and secure Kwara State, we must prepare for the possibility of urban terrorism in the southwest. That would trigger a capital flight from Lagos that would devastate the West African economy.
The picture you paint is one of a region on the brink. The old structures ECOWAS, the French security umbrella, the assumption of democratic transition, they're gone. In their place, we have a violent scramble for power and resources.
It is a moment of high peril. The decisions made in Niamey, Abuja, and Washington in the next few months will determine whether West Africa stabilizes or slides into a prolonged era of state fragmentation.
We will continue to monitor these developments with the vigilance they demand. That brings us to the end of this intelligence update.
Before we sign off, I want to circle back to the tool that allowed us to synthesize this complex web of events. As we mentioned, Stylo News is available for both mobile and computer platforms.
It is a remarkable capability. It allows any individual to create personal intelligence-style briefs, just like the one we presented tonight. You can pull from hundreds of traditional news sources and social media platforms like X, filtering it all through an AI that understands geopolitical context.
The features are robust. AI search, a strategic watch list, and the ability to track global trends instantly. In a world this volatile, having the same information picture as the decision makers is not a luxury. It is a necessity.
We encourage you to subscribe and get AI-powered news on demand at www.stylonews.com. It is the smartest way to stay informed.
Indeed. Knowledge is the only hedge against uncertainty.
Thank you for allowing us to guide you through this deep dive. We appreciate your time and your trust. If there are other regions or topics you wish for us to analyze, please do request them via our platform.
And do follow Stylo News on your favorite social media channels. Stay safe and stay informed.
Good night.
Good night.